And we'll move to the second part of this afternoon, which is persuasion. Think about the last time you tried to persuade someone of something. Were you as successful as you would have liked to be? Would you like to be more successful? Would you like to know what techniques are being used on you? What are the spin doctors trying on you? Well, we're going to talk some for the next few minutes on persuasion. And there's 3 basic techniques that we'll talk about. Again, ask questions as necessary. And I'll try to give you the basics from a decade of experience where, although I'm an engineer, I spent a decade of my time at the INL with side projects involving spooky social scientists. It's weird stuff. Really weird stuff. And the central point about persuasion is that we all have mental filters. We all shield ourselves from some of the information, some of the ideas, some of the opinions that are around us. And why do we do this? Well, number one, we can't absorb everything every minute of the day. Think, when you're walking, do you think about where you put your foot? Exactly? No. But if you're on ice and you have slick shoes on, might you think more about it? And because you know the consequence of doing it wrong is high, and it's a touchier, more difficult situation. The social scientists, of course, dream up a fancy-dancy word for that, and it's called being cognitive misers. We think about tasks as little as we think we have to. If I'm just walking on this carpet, I know that I don't need to think about it, and I'll just walk. If I'm on ice, unless I'm asleep or drunk or something, I'm going to pay attention to the fact I'm on ice, and I'm going to put more cognitive capability on the fact that I'm on ice. That phenomena happens everything we do. The other reason for the filter is that we protect ourselves. We protect ourselves from ideas that might conflict with our mental models of the world around us, of our cherished ideals. Call it paradigm, there's a whole lot of different words and they all mean roughly the same thing. So the filter protects us. Protects us from trying to do too many things with our brain, and protects us against change. Now, if I'm trying to persuade you, I have to deal with this. If you want yourself to be more teachable, you have to realize that you have one of these up, and you have to lower it. You have to make yourself teachable or coachable. Now, again, we all have these. In fact, we have to have them to some degree. The problem is they can form a box. A nice, cozy box. That box might turn into a comfy, cozy coffin, because you might get brain dead. If a friend comes up and knocks on your mental box, they might be telling you, wake up, open your mind to a new idea, get out of the coffin, and pay attention to something new. And that's part of what we have to do with persuasion. So the first general category of persuasion, we shall overcome. I'm going to persuade you with facts and figures, and a bunch of details. And most of the time, that's great. If I'm in a class learning algebra, I don't want fancy stories. I don't want fairy tales. I want to know equations. If I want to know what happened yesterday in Idaho Falls, I pick up the newspaper. I get facts. So we shall overcome is a great technique lots of the time. Now, I have that mental filter up. So things are coming at it. Facts are coming at it. If I, however, start getting concerned about those facts, I'll stiffen up. I'll get defensive. So if you detect someone that's defensive, something's going on. It's because they're protecting their internal mental models. And if you're not careful, it turns into this. So instead of being Joshua, blowing his horn and having the walls come down, and your facts go wandering in, they fight. You've got a polarized situation, and you're not going to make any more progress. So that's the limit of what we shall overcome can accomplish. Next technique. Don't worry, be happy. Instead of trying to smash through that filter, you can hurl some humor over it, or slide a story, or slip a slogan. You might even sling some sarcasm over that filter. You're outsmarting the filter. You're trying to get the person to lower their guard. So instead of brute force, now I'm trying to be nice to the filter. Don't worry, be happy. And slide, curl, squeeze by that filter. Think for a moment about a story we've all heard, watched, or both, and how powerful this single word is. Scrooge. Now, I could flood the PowerPoint with an hour-long lecture on Elizabethan economics and social strategy issues. Would that be as powerful as the single word Scrooge? Who thinks it would be? It's like, I've got more PowerPoints right here. We could switch to that if that would be more persuasive. So sometimes the story is more persuasive than facts. As an engineer, that was tough for me to learn. It's why people put a lot of time and energy into slogans. Pick your favorite issue, and there's a slogan for it. And what happens if you have a slogan on one side of an issue and someone doesn't respect that slogan? You fight. That's indicating again the power of slogans, the power of humor, the power of stories. Power of analogies sometimes. We shall overcome. Don't worry, be happy. And there's a third one. Don't worry. It's over here, sorry. He's not heavy, he's my brother. Remember that song? When I give this talk in front of a younger audience, I have a problem at this point. They haven't all been brought up right with classical music. What am I saying in that title? He's not heavy, he's my brother. I'm changing how I've pictured the problem. I've reframed it. So instead of trying to blast my way through the filter, instead of trying to slide around it, I'm trying to grasp it and shake hands. Because I'm changing the terms of the discussion. I'm reframing it. if at all possible, with a win-win. You've heard of that phrase, I suspect. That's a third strategy. Whenever possible, you want to go to a situation where you can form a common value, a common objective. President Eisenhower used to say, if you can't solve a problem at one level, take it to the next higher level, which sometimes is very counterintuitive. In other words, what you're trying to do there is, if I can't get agreement at this level, maybe I can get agreement at a higher level. And then figure out what parts of the more detailed story you can maintain agreement on.
So you got a lot of dead wood on the way.
Yes. Sometimes you find out that a whole lot of things that you thought were not changeable, you find out are changeable. So be it, we shall overcome, don't worry, be happy, she's not heavy, she's my sister. These are three techniques, and anytime you turn on the news, or read the paper, or read a blog, one or more of these are in play. In this talk, all three of them are there. Where I've thrown some facts, some third words, stories, and some common cause, common objective situations. Questions? Artillery shells. Yep.
There's a book called Smart Questions, and I assume that it's one of the ways that
Yes?
asking smart questions to get through perhaps areas without direct confrontation.
Yes. Just as within situational leadership, where in between those extremes, questions are useful in supporting the people in moving to independence. Questions is a way of seeing if I can reach agreement. Engage the filter, engage the person that's using the filter, and see if we can get to this. Now, not always possible, but it's part of your toolbox. Other questions? Robin?
So you're talking about these three ways of, quote, persuading people. Do you try one, and if that doesn't work, try the other one, and if that doesn't work, try the third one? Or do you just
Yes.
learn all three and use them intermixedly?
Like situational leadership, you have to assess the situation as best you can and adapt as you learn more. Abner and John and I have a trip next week, business trip, and we'll see how it goes.
But I think we already have decided not to use the initial approach.
We're trying to be softer, yes.
Because if we use that first, then we say, let's try to go to the be happy, don't worry, it's too late.
Yep, you've already polarized things.
If we have formed a very strong, solid, concrete wall in front of us, they don't really be happy approach.
Yeah,
They look at us with suspicion.
it's not going to work.
Yeah. So,
So you assess and adapt.
Well, I was thinking, I think your assessment depends on who you're speaking to.
Absolutely.
I mean, it sounds to me like you're talking to a group of people, so you're
Yeah.
gonna have many different personalities, but when you're dealing one-on-one, that person will tell you which ones of these. They'll tell you who they are. They'll tell you if they need facts. They'll tell you
Yep.
if they need, if they're a storyteller. If you just listen to them and don't speak first, and listen to them.
Did everyone hear that?
No, can you repeat what people say, because they're talking to you?
A lot of people,
Oh.
right, a lot of people will tell you what technique will work with them. Listen to what they say, how they say it, how they're expressing themselves. Speak in their language or their style. That's a good place to start. Okay.
how much you think the leadership style changed through the years since you started it? Why it happened?
My leadership
Yeah,
style?
I mean, during our lifetimes, during your
Oh, my
lifetime.
lifetime.
And why did it happen? Because I started working at school again, and I see how much different teaching is compared to when I was at school.
My own sense of what I've observed is that this business in the middle, which maybe 30, 40 years ago was relatively unusual. Yeah, it was often Hollywood and novels and so forth. But now this, I would say, is the most common. And one of the reasons is we like to be entertained. Funny, but that's the way it is. Most people, I would submit, would rather watch A Christmas Carol than the hour-long lecture on Elizabethan facts, figures, and whatnot. It's more entertaining. Think, for example, first president I'm aware of who during the State of the Union address would have someone in the balcony and would tell a story associated with that person. It was Ronald Reagan. But gee, Reagan's career was in Hollywood. Gee, a former actor might have thought about the power of stories. What a shock. Pope John Paul II, or I should say St. John Paul now, his training, his initial training was as an actor.
He was doing it as a hobby. Because
Granted, but he
wasn't
would,
really
yeah,
smart.
he would be on stage, he'd learn a lot of those techniques. So we're also busier and busier and busier. It used to be in media, news media training, they tell you to work real hard to get a 30-second soundbite. It's like 8 or 9 seconds now. People's attention span is doing this. I've even heard lectures where if you're trying to communicate, a 9-word slogan is better than a 10-word slogan, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can get it down to a single word that will communicate your point, you have an advantage over the person that takes 10 words to get the point across. Is that fair? No. Does that bother those of us who are technically minded and know there's zillions and zillions of details? Sure, it bothers us. Is that the world we live in? You betcha. There's a whole lot of speeches I can remember. They boil down to 1, 2, or 3 words. Try a couple of these. I have a dream. Tear down this wall. These are people who made their living in persuasion. They're therefore people to watch how they did it. They boiled it down. That's the slogans. Whether you like it or not, slogans are extremely powerful. You might hate it, but it's there. It's undeniable. I don't know if I answered your question, but I danced around it.
Yeah. I would say that also there is much less hierarchy right now than it used to be. And for instance, teacher doesn't have such a power as it used to
Yes.
have in the past.
Yes.
So, and there's much more mass media, which also makes it difficult to persuade somebody if you have opinion, from all different sources.
Yes. One thing that I notice is going on, if I'm worried that something, my supporters, if I have a side in some fight, if I'm worried that my supporters' filters might let in enemy information, you know what I can do about it? I can get them angry. I can get them riled up. In which case, the slogans, the humors, the stories, the other facts and figures will bounce off. That's polarization. That's what's going on. If your side is ticking you off about those enemies, those bad guys, whoever they are, they're trying to strengthen your filter. so that you don't pay attention to the other side. That's what's going on. It's all social science weirdnesses, as far as I'm concerned. If it was me, facts and figures. Anything else?